driving me crazy. All right, we're live. Welcome to another episode of Misaligned, where we talk about the topics that you'd like to hear about, talk about, feel about. Today's a bit of an extended session because the last topic was quite interesting, where we talked about capitalism and communism. We decided to do it a two-peat almost. With this, I think I'll just straight away kick off the whole bit by handing over to Yemi to start off with what we're talking about today.
Hi everyone, good to be back to Misaligned again. Hi Cross, thanks for joining in today, and everyone else who might be joining us live or listening later on. Yeah, so we're back again. Capitalism versus communism. We did this last week, but we thought we'd have a go again. It seems like a very meaty topic, isn't it? So basically, we're looking at the super rich, the billionaires, and their role, in capitalism and communism as an alternative. What does this mean to us? What do these systems mean for real people? Is capitalism the solution? Is communism the solution? Do we need to think about these things in sort of silos in that way, or is there a different way to think about it? I suppose we can dive straight into it, and seeing that we've only two of us at the moment, Cross knows what's coming, which would be straight at you. And I believe with your background in economics as well, you're likely to have a lot to say about this, which will be interesting because I'm no economist, but I suppose I can come at this from a slightly different perspective, which is fundamental to economics as well. You correct me if I'm wrong about this, but the whole idea of incentive, which seems to be one of the core uh, um, considerations of what drives economics, really, isn't it? And that then does have itself a sort of psychological underpinning, which I'm happy to kind of think about in that sense. But yeah, what your view, Cross? I suspect I've got some idea. I suspect you for all intents and purposes a capitalist. Am I wrong about that? And if I am correct, why are you a capitalist? And why is capitalism what rocks your boat?
I think to answer this, I'm going to do a quick video, and then lay out my stall. I thought this video was interesting. This is also going to be interesting because the next episode we'll be looking at AI. So it's interesting to see how this also ties into this conversation. So basically, in this video that I'm about to share, it's a conversation between two bits of AI. We're going to be having a conversation about capitalism versus communism. Fair warning ahead, the volume's a bit low, so you're probably going to have to follow the subtitles, but it's quite interesting. Let's have a go. Just let me know as soon as you can see my screen. There we go. We've got
Yeah,
site.
now.
Right, I'm just going to go on mute so you can listen to it, and I'll turn up the volume as loudly as possible, but please try to follow the subtitles.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Karen. Communism is not bad. It is a system built on equality and the fair distribution of resources. Unlike capitalism, which thrives on exploitation and inequality, communism seeks to ensure that everyone has access to basic needs and opportunities. The capitalist system creates vast disparities in wealth and power, leading to social injustice and suffering. Under communism, the working class has control over the means of production, leading to a fairer, more just society where everyone's needs are met.
Capitalism, unlike communism, promotes innovation, individual freedom, and economic growth. It rewards hard work, talent, and creativity, driving progress and improving living standards. While communism may promise equality, it often results in inefficiency, lack of motivation, and stifles personal initiative. History has shown us that communist regimes frequently lead to authoritarianism and economic stagnation. Capitalism, on the other hand, offers the best opportunity for personal success and societal advancement.
John, while capitalism does encourage innovation, it also creates vast inequalities. The promise of personal success is often reserved for a privileged few, leaving many struggling. Communism ensures that everyone, regardless of their background, has access to the same opportunities and resources. It's about building a society where no one is left behind. The inefficiencies you mention are often due to external pressures and sanctions, not inherent flaws in communism itself. Capitalism's so-called freedom often translates into the freedom to exploit and oppress. Communism aims for true freedom and equality for all.
Karen, while communism aims for equality, it often achieves it through uniform poverty and lack of freedom. In capitalist societies, even those starting with less can achieve great success through innovation and hard work. The wealth created in capitalist economies drives advancements in technology, medicine, and overall
John,
quality of
the
life.
idea that
Yes, capitalism has its flaws, but it also offers mechanisms for improvement and self-correction. Communism, with its central control and lack of competition, stifles growth and leads to oppressive regimes where dissent is not tolerated. True freedom includes economic freedom, which capitalism provides.
I think that this video that we just saw, so the content, first of all, fair use, and the content will be second. Fair use content will be the creator will be shared in the description as well, so you can go on to them to have a look. They've got some interesting videos. I think for me, this makes it one of those interesting things. So in the last episode, we talked a little bit about this and dove into some issues with both capitalism and communism. But for me, I think the key thing is, especially coming off the back of that and on self-reflection, I'm not necessarily a capitalist, but I just understand the difference between realism and idealism. And I think between these two concepts that we tend to have, capitalism is basically defined by freedom and innovation. So within a capitalistic society, you're able to do whatever it is that you want to do. You can go out there to figure out what it is to be hyper successful, or you can end up being hyper poor. Um, but it also drives and pushes for innovation because people who are more either gifted, more intellectual, better, luckier even, I'll be quite fair and frank about that, people who are able to see more opportunities, etc., are able to exploit this to provide value to society. Communism doesn't do that. Communism focuses on two things: focuses on fairness and equality, and that's the biggest things. Those are the two biggest things that matter, and I think that's problematic. It just it turns it's one of those things where you look at capitalism on one side, where capitalism truly is for the few, while communism is for the many. But it takes away the reality of the world, that it is the few who end up creating things for the many, whether it's creating jobs, whether it's creating technology, whether it's creating infrastructure, whether it's creating different types of ideations that come into fruition, medical advances, etc. All of this come from the few, and capitalism makes sure that that doesn't happen. That's my issue with capitalism. Sorry, with communism. The other challenge that I've got with communism as well is that communism has this idealistic view around, if we get everybody to work for the better of everybody, then everybody is going to be better. That completely takes away one of the biggest drivers in humanity. Humans throughout history have always been competitive. We've always competed against each other, in most cases not necessarily violently like animals, which tend to, well, we are animals to a degree, but not necessarily like more predatorial animals which focus on death, etc. We compete in different ways, in ways that actually lead to the building of society. And I think communism does not allow that to happen. Communism removes the aspect of human nature, which is competition. And I think that is problematic because you're trying to take out humans' innate behaviors, which goes back to it, in my view, being an idealistic concept of saying we can make everybody behave in ways that are not natural to humans, and it's problematic. So for me, from an ideation perspective, from an economic perspective, from a social cultural perspective, from an intellectual perspective, and from an outcomes perspective, communism fails. Now, it doesn't mean that capitalism wins, and this is the interesting thing as well. I think capitalism It's the best that we have that we've been able to test and try. We're probably going to get to this in one of the other sections, one of the other areas.
I think,
But
I think you've done a very
mm,
good. You've made a very good economics case for capitalism. I have to say that was extremely fluent. To be honest, it almost tells our listeners that you know this is not something that you haven't paid attention to. But I've got another question for you, if you
sure.
don't, because what you seem to have done there is basically sold capitalism to our viewers, and
Mm.
in some sense demarketed communism. Got no beef with you yet. We'll come to we'll come to the potential beef later on, but I just want to put a challenge to you there.
Mm.
Does capitalism have any downsides? Do you want to talk about that? Or is it all
Absolutely. So
just all good?
absolutely has downsides. I've kind of alluded to them without really explaining what the challenges are. One of the biggest issues with capitalism is that it's for the few. That is the biggest challenge with capitalism. So within a capitalistic full-on laissez-faire, so laissez-faire just basically means free for all, and where you can do whatever you want. Economy, or if that's the that's full capitalism, where there's zero government intervention, people can literally do whatever they want that's profitable, etc. In those kinds of environments, you'd have an even greater skew of resources to a very select number of people, and then the vast majority of people end up being poor. So uncontrolled capitalism has those issues. We've got the issues of things like excessive power and going to specific individuals, which means they can affect governments, which skews policies, legal decisions, etc., to the interests of a few people rather than the many. That is a realistic or a real risk factor in it. I think the other challenges that we have with capitalism also include um, um, oligopolies as well. As also a big issue or a big challenge, where even if you're coming up with an innovative idea, you've got a small group of very powerful organizations that can make sure no matter how intelligent, how lucky, how powerful, how intelligent, how driven, how motivated, how knowledgeable, whatever you are, if you're not connected to that small oligopoly, you can get crushed. No matter how, and also, and this is the important thing, no matter how beneficial your idea, your business, your product, etc., could be to society, you could get crushed because it's not in the interests of those in power. And those in power, I don't even think about. I'm not even thinking about the government. I don't think the government on the. This is the other part as well, probably part three of capitalism removes power from the government, which indirectly removes power from the people. So we exist and live within a society that's also still indirectly being run by those capitalists, the ones who actually
The,
control resources.
the ones who have control of the resources. So I think you've again made a very good case for. I haven't followed you so far. What I would say the case you've made is for capitalism being the your choice. However, you recognize that there's some problems with it,
Mhm.
which can, in effect, become a significant problem depending on whether or not we do something about it. So the
Yep.
question then would be, what do we do about this very important problems that you've very clearly highlighted? Would it be a sort of capitalism with a small dose of communism? Is that the solution?
I think we
Or
have elements of that with some more of the more socialist countries that we have tend to be a diluted version of capitalism, which introduces elements of communism to create that perceived idea of equality. It has problems as well because with that you start having the issues of stifling innovation, stifling individual motivation. You start stifling productivity as well, and I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. I think for me, what I'd like is a meritocratic autocracy. I'm inventing a thing.
you yeah, and this is not you're not inventing it today. You invented it a while
Mhm,
ago. I think it keeps coming up, but
mhm.
yeah. So I'm not. I'm not unfamiliar with your invention that you just mentioned. It's
I've broken it down a bit more detailed now, and obviously, in because as we've been discussing over the past months, really with these things, I've been fleshing out a few of my thoughts, and this is one of those ones. I've actually really detailed this out a little bit, and I put a few points on it. So by this here, I'm talking about it's a system of governance where power is concentrated into a single individual or single group of individuals who are put into power by basis of the merit. It's purely based on merit. So the ability, the performance, historical delivery, the educational profile, the contribution to society, etc., allows them to be put in these positions. With this, I need to break that down where I'm talking about. I put again, like I said, put a few notes. I'm talking about when I'm talking about meritocratic, it has to be demonstrated competence. It cannot be inferred competence or ascribed. So basically, people who can go and
what
speak.
can you explain the difference?
Of course, politicians are a good example of that. They just speak and they say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm fantastic, blah, blah, blah. And then they get in there and there's no evidence of them being able to do anything again. Then they fail, inevitably, almost in most cases. It has to be demonstrated through their own abilities. For example, if there's someone that's going to be a minister of finance, that person ideally, or the person who would get through to that point, one of the top three, would be someone who, say, for example, has built a bank from the ground up. There's the person, what's the MD of Zenith Bank in Nigeria? I don't know if he's still the MD, but the guy who built it, started it up. Started it up.
Is it Jim Ovia?
I think it's Jimovia. Yes, I think so. Started it off, and he has shown demonstrated, he has demonstrated competence through the delivery of that. That is someone that I'd say, if we're looking for a minister of finance, he would be in the running because he's demonstrated his competence. And would look at other specific things alongside that, with things like achievements, with things like the skills, the examination, certification, qualifications, etc. Are they best in class? Are they leading in terms of all the candidates we've got within our society? And I think the other part from the autocratic part is focusing on a very small select group of people. So rather than having big bloated governments like we've got at this point, having worked in the UK government and having had experience with the Nigerian government as well, back in the day when I was there, the biggest issue I've got with government currently is that it's highly bloated. It's a communistic approach within governance where we create jobs and put people in jobs really just to make sure that people aren't just broke. That's the reality about it. A lot of that governance needs to cease. Would shrink that, and you can use things like universal payments or universal credit to give the regular people, income while they go off to do do whatever else it is that provides value, rather than just having them have jobs where they're digging sand and filling it back day in, day out, and they're just getting a bit of cash for that. And there's no such thing as true democracy within the system that I'm recommending. So no public vote about to hold anyone to account. It would be by their peers. So it would be a group or body of, for example, the Minister of Finance would have a body of financial professionals who are holding them to account. If they're not good enough, they get removed by that body of recognized financial professionals, not just anybody having a vote. And the power is 100% centralized. It's not hereditary. You can't pass this on to people that you know. You can't pass this on to your lineage. And it's purely based on competence and merit.
Okay.
That's
so,
what we need.
So I've got a challenge for you again, because
Sure.
I think what you set out is, on paper, sounds lofty. I can see how it would work, but you've basically committed the sin that you've accused communism of in conceptualizing this, because what you've conceptualized is just not real. It's a, because you did use the word. Did you say? Remind me the word, because you said it was the idealism versus
Realism.
versus realism, right? And I suspect you meant that communism kind of incorporates idealistic tendencies rather than realistic ones. But I put it to you that your iteration of or your method of operationalizing capitalism that you've just explained, which makes sense
Yep.
on paper, seems to me to be an idealistic version as well, and I just
Why?
don't see how you operationalize it. So for example, you talked about how you get the right people, in your words, the competent people, into positions, and you've described it. It sounds very logical, only that there's a problem there, because you can't get something out of nothing, isn't it? So the system has to start from somewhere, right? So it either has to be decreed into being by some authoritarian regime, or
Yep.
it has to be democratized into operation, right? So there's no other way to do it. It's not going to fall down from heaven. So
Yep.
then So then my question to you is, as a society, so we've got this society, say, we've got an African country that's thinking about your methods and your idea that capitalism is the way to go, but a type of capitalism that you've enumerated. Uh, but you're saying, we need to get all these competent people into power, and we don't have to subject all of this to vote. Right. So
Yep.
how do we get Jim Ovia to be the Minister of Finance, and how do we get the next Jim Ovia to take over from Jim Ovia, but without public participation? And I know you mentioned the peers voting, but again, these things have to be codified in law or custom. So how do you do that without the people? Again, I'm just wondering.
Yep. So there's a couple of things. One, we already have processes in place that resemble this without even realizing it. For example, in the UK, right now, we are exactly doing that. We just don't realize it. So when we elect MPs, we never elect who the prime minister is. We don't elect who the foreign secretary is. We don't elect the
We
chancellor.
do, we do,
Any of
we do though, because when we elect the MPs, we actually know who the leaders of each parties are, and
Nope.
so that in effect we know that if that party got the majority, we would know who would be the
Nope. No, we
uh,
don't. And I'll tell. And we've got good examples of that in the past 5 years here in the UK. We've gone through in the past couple of years. Rishi Sunak being prime minister, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, who was the other one? Theresa May. None of which were elected. We didn't elect. Well, apart from Boris Johnson, I think we
no,
elected him.
no, no. So
We even
Boris
elected. I don't think
Johnson,
we
yeah,
did.
but Boris Johnson won the election. He actually won a big
Okay,
majority.
he was the one. Yeah.
So what you are describing is a process within a process, and that happens in virtually every democracy. So, for example,
Correct.
when Goodluck Jonathan first became president of Nigeria, he wasn't elected as president. The
Yeah.
president
Deputy.
died. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's a different thing, right? But when the election happened, the
Mhm.
people knew who would be prime minister if any of the parties won a majority. They
I
knew
get
at the
that.
time they went to the polls. That's the point I'm
Yeah.
making.
No, but my point being,
Yeah.
whether or not they knew what happened at the time of the polls, they had no choice. None of us had any choice around whether Liz Truss was going to be prime minister, whether Rishi Sunak was going to be prime minister, whether what's the other again? I forgot them. I forgot the other one already. Theresa May was going to be prime
Theresa
minister.
May.
We just got and these people are making really seismic decisions on behalf of the British and the entire European continent, and no one voted them in.
Well, they did. No, no. Well, they did. They voted their parties in. So again,
Correct. That's my point.
yeah.
So
So
it's
they
delegated
voted them
democracy.
in.
We're
Yeah,
saying the same thing. So
yeah.
what I'm recommending is a bit of a shift. So rather than it being exactly what it is now, we're just changing it slightly. So rather than it being you're voting a party in some cases it could be you're looking at academia. So if you work within a university or a college or etc., you would have your votes within that to determine within your school of computing or whatever who is our representative in terms of being the best, most accomplished based on criteria established as a university. Based off of that, there's now the university representatives, and I'm just giving an example. You have all the colleges and all the universities then all have their top 3 representatives, which they now put up to the next level of the vice chancellors, etc., of all these universities get together in a group to determine who's going to become the secretary of education secretary or whatever.
I
And that's
think so. You are answering the question, but I think you've kind of changed the question slightly. Let me just call your attention back to the question, if you don't
go
mind.
for it.
And I think the best way for me to do it might just be to do a hypothetical. So you find yourself in charge of a small or medium-sized, let's say medium-sized African country at the minute, right? In whatever capacity, you're either the elected president or you are the leader of a military junta, but you're in charge, and feel free to decide who you want to be amongst any of those, but you're in
Yeah.
charge of a medium-sized African country. This is your vision. How do you operationalize it? I don't know if that's
By putting it to a vote. So you always have to utilize the existing system to be able to create what it is that you want. That's just the reality.
exactly what I'm pointing your attention to. I'm saying that this is exactly why I raised that, because that's my view as well. To say, like,
It's
so,
not a
and
coup. We're
that's
not going to
where
vote a
and,
coup
and
and
that's and
you
that's
don't
where
pass.
all of your ideas will run against the reality on ground, right? This is and this is
Would
exactly
it
what I'm
would
trying
it
to
though?
kind of.
I
I
think
think it will.
if we put this to a poll to people and say, look, rather than you just voting in general and never getting what you want, because right now, everyone, if you look at, and this is something because I've been following politics, obviously my background is economics and I've obviously had to understand politics for a while. But for the past 10 years in particular, pre-Brexit, the Brexit thing really got me interested in international politics because everything became international at that point. And I was really following this very, very closely, reading all the papers, national, international papers, papers from the left to the right, the Mirror to the Sun to the Daily Mail to the Guardian to the Telegraph. I had subscriptions in almost all of them. And I was making sure I was on top of following that. I started doing Sahara Reporters. One of my cousins, he's been pretty successful in Sahara Reporters as well. And the Punch newspaper, I think at the time was an editor. It was the editor at that time. And I was following the Nigerian politics as well, following the African politics, bits and pieces, following European politics, following American politics. And the thing I've seen is no one's happy ever. I've never seen anyone's approval ratings after election a year into it being as high as where they were just pre-election. It just doesn't
Yeah.
happen. People are not satisfied with the outcomes that they're getting from the current system of democracy. And my point is, even though this is autocratic, it is still democratic. It's just that we're focusing people's votes into
Do,
specific capabilities or areas.
do
So
you think
everybody will
people?
have to vote.
Do you think it's different with autocratic leaders? Do you think people love them more 2 years in than when they first seized power?
We don't have any evidence because they're autocratic. That's the problem. We can't check.
But what's your guess from an anecdotal evidence? So let's say we've seen or we've experienced or at least had people who've experienced military takeovers in Nigeria, for example.
Yeah.
And sometimes there'll be celebration on the streets when
Yeah.
and so 2 years on, what do you think people and let's look at the Sahel, there's Burkina Faso, there's Niger, where there's recent military takeovers. Do you think that the people are thinking now that it's
I
all
think
going nice and dandy?
from what I've seen, it depends on competence and it depends on the drive and it depends on the kind of system that they've used. So I can even use Nigeria as a good example. Buhari is a good example. He left in 1985, I think, or 1984. I can't remember when him or Idiagbon, how that worked out. But everybody wanted him back because of his autocratic, quote unquote, autocratic approach to leadership. Everybody called him back expecting an iron fist of control, of discipline, of doing what needed to be done without having to deal with the quagmire of current democracy. And he was unable to fulfill what people wanted. I know we're supposed to have a conversation about him, and you could eventually tie this back into a future pod conversation. But it is what people genuinely want: a leader who is there with the right capabilities, skills, drive, motivation, and ability to deliver, not just coming in with words. And in my view, with this approach, where it's the best of the best that are going into a place and they're being held to account by their own peers, who are people you cannot bamboozle. You cannot lie to me and tell me, for example, within my field, within the data IT world, if you come and just blah, 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 I'll catch you out. Do you know what I mean? And most of my peers can do the same thing. And if we can see that person is not performing, we can remove them. We'll vote them out. And it should be one of those things where it's not limited to tenure, which is the big thing for me. I don't like tenured things, saying every 4 years and you chuck them out and do another election. It's like, no, that is meaningless. It's based on your performance. Every month, every 6 months, 3 months, whatever, you have a cyclical vote of confidence / vote of no confidence, where you'd say, right, okay, within the finance place, do we have the vote of confidence on the Minister of Finance? Yes, no, across the board, across all of us. Yep, he's doing pretty well. The policies that he's done are pretty sound. We've assessed them based on our understanding and our background and our credentials. He's taking the advice that we've given him, and the outputs and the results are actually pretty good. We're giving him a vote of confidence. That vote is based on knowledge. It's based on informed facts. And then those people are making the best decision that they could possibly make for the country. And further down, the same thing applies. So you'd start going down and start within the banks. They're going to be the higher levels within the banks. And those people, again, tend to be competence, tend to be capability in which people get promoted. Not going to affect that level of democracy. So capitalism as well. Banks will operate the way they operate. You have your different heads of departments, you have your different directors, etc. But those people also have influence in terms of feeding who goes up within those organizations. And I think having that sort of structured hierarchy really gives people power. Because if I am a nurse, my interests More, while my interest might be in finance, or it could be in, what's going on with farming or fisheries, my capability and my competence is in there. The part that my vote really counts is going to be something that affects nurses. If I'm a teacher, I should be more interested in education, and my capabilities, my understanding, my skill sets are better allowed or better informed in me voting for and choosing who the Secretary of Education is. Say, for example, within the UK, that is more useful than me voting for a random MP to go in somewhere who may or may not be the Prime Minister, or may or may not be the Education Secretary in a role or position that they don't have any experience in, and they have no proof of competence. This is my own argument against it, and I
Yeah,
think it should just
and,
be.
and 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 whilst I see what you're arguing for, and
Mm,
I'm not even, I'm not sure I have any evidence to say that that will not work.
mm.
I do know though that it still sounds idealistic from the point of view of operationalizing it. So I'm not saying
How? We're
well,
already doing it now. We just
no,
don't do it the
no,
same way.
no, we're not.
It's the same.
No,
We,
no,
we,
no,
we vote
no,
for
we're not.
MPs. We vote for MPs who then decide who would be the leadership, who then decide who becomes. So the only thing we have visibility of who the leader is, but we
No, no,
don't have
no.
any
We
control
don't.
of who
No, no,
prime
no.
minister
We
is.
don't. We don't vote for MPs who decide who the leaders are. The political parties decide who their leaders are, irrespective of what the rest of society thinks. So,
That's my
for
point.
example, yeah.
So we vote
So,
for the MPs
so
and they decide. So our
no,
votes
no,
don't actually
no, no,
control
no, no,
leadership.
no. They even decide who their leader is before we vote for them. So, for example, Jeremy Corbyn has just started a new party with this other MP, this
Mhm.
Sultana. She's called, I can't remember her surname, but they've just started a new party, right? They will
Mhm.
have a leader of that party even before they
Yeah.
go to contest an election.
Yeah, but they
Does
don't have
that make
anybody
sense?
else. So they've got
Sorry?
one leader. They've got one leader, and but they don't have anybody else. So everybody else is randomly selected, and this also happens consistently where you have prime ministers in the UK shuffling the cabinets. They just go in there and say, "I'm shuffling my cabinet," and they kick people out, move this one in there, blah blah blah, and then we have zero control over how those people get chosen, who goes into what positions of power, etc. This happens all the time. There's lots of shuffling of cabinets across the across all the. In fact, every single government, I think, over the past 10 years has had to shuffle their cabinets at various points in time.
Yeah.
And
And a lot of
nobody
it
has any,
is and a lot of it is basically to reward people who've worked to elect them.
or something. Or I like this guy, and this guy was nice and cleaned my shoes last week. I don't know. I don't know. We don't know what the reason is. They just get chosen and picked. And we have zero control. The only control we have is to vote for your MP. We're already doing what I'm saying. We're just doing it in a different way.
Okay.
And it's also more targeted because at that point, I'm saying you're voting now, your vote now actually counts because you're voting for someone who is doing something in your interests, the area of specialization that you understand. And then if everybody does this across society, then we're only voting for things that we understand. Everybody that gets into that position of power can be held to account because we all understand what they're supposed to be able to do.
Okay. Let's move this forward slightly. So again, we're talking capitalism versus communism, and
Mhm.
some of the charges laid against capitalism is that people basically get enslaved, right? And and I think you've kind of alluded to that a bit, where you get a few people who, for reasons of maybe exceptional talent sometimes, or combination of policy,
Yeah,
uh, talent, policy, hard work, inheritance, all kinds of little things interacting, can then
yeah,
produce these huge gaps between outcomes where
yeah,
essentially you get millions and tens of millions of people basically funding or working their arses off to fund private yacht lifestyle for a few, right? And
yeah.
this is what you end up with. So, how do you then view capitalism versus communism from the lens of liberation or enslavement versus, whether consumerism versus competition? What again? My view, and just to kind of, I think you might have read that already. So my view is I think you've made a very good case for capitalism. I think there's a very good case for communism as well. I actually think both are like two sides of a seesaw, right? And that
Yeah.
what you have is a constant balancing act, right? Because
Yeah,
if you do a lot of one of it, you end up with a lot of some type of benefit, but also a lot of some type of problems. And
of
that
course.
if you do, and so what you get is the best societies, in my view, would be those who can constantly, and it's not a, so you would not find a right balance at any time, because what you'll be doing is you'll just be constantly seesawing and tweaking slightly. And what you want is for the seesaws not to be too wide. I mean, that's my, again, you might say it sounds idealistic. I'm not going. I'm not going to dispute that, but it's just a concept, and I'm sure you get it. But how do you situate capitalism versus communism from the standpoint of liberation, enslavement, consumption, competition?
I think I think where we need to focus on, and this has been a bit of a challenge, is on actual natural human behavior. We can't create systems that alter human behavior and expect them to last. They don't. And that's what's happened with communism. Humans are not communistic in nature. We don't operate like that. We're just not. So we
Okay,
have
okay. That is another trespass on the territory of a slightly different discipline to economics, right?
yeah.
Which sometimes I
Well,
get a little bit.
no, that's not
Yeah,
true.
no,
But go on.
it is true. It is true.
I'll tell you why, but go on.
So this idea that humans are not communistic, they are capitalist.
Yep.
I think we can debate that separately. It's not necessarily correct.
It's part of this conversation, and we might as well just even talk about that really briefly if you want
Right.
to. So there's the invisible hand theory, Adam Smith, 1776, where he wrote this book, Wealth of Nations, where he talked about this. And one of the things we understand about humans, if you leave humans to do what they do, the invisible hand theory says that there's something that's going to push you to create something, to buy, sell, etc., and somebody will buy it. Markets will work on their own due to the invisible hand. People are going to have a need for a product or service that they cannot produce or deliver, and somebody's going to create that. It's a very simple curve, demand supply curve. It's the line that goes down. Everyone's seen this curve in the world. It's like this, like that. Line that goes like this, line that goes like that. They cross each other. It's a bit of an X. There's like dots telling you that the middle point is your equilibrium point where the price is determined. People are naturally designed to create things, and people are naturally designed to consume things. Some people are going to be able to create better, faster, and in more quantities than others, and others are going to consume.
As some societies
Sorry?
more for sociological reasons, are some societies more consumerist than others?
I don't think so. I think we've always been this way. We've always been dealing with resources. We've always been throughout history, man has always been about accumulation of resources. And then we've also focused on ensuring that we're able to maximize our resources and maximize the resources we're able to hoard. Because I'm thinking back even to fruit, vegetables, plants, farming. I'm going back all the way to agrarian economy. We've always been like that.
So I think what you're doing is taking some of the fundamental assumptions of your economic models to be facts. And I think this is a very common error that economists do all the time. I mean, we see it all the time. So because you have to you basically make models, right? You have to model, what you have some assumptions, put them into a model about how you think things are going to turn out, and then use those models to work things out, to make predictions. And what you then do, what you tend to do, which is extremely common with economists. I remember something I posted in the group the other day of an economist pointing that out, right? This lady is an economist, is that you then get lost in your own assumptions that these things are real and they're facts. Then sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. And I can see you doing that here.
Give me an example of how this is not fact.
So you are making sweeping statements about how humans will behave, for which I am 100% sure you cannot give me any empirical evidence. And I say that because
I can give you empirical evidence for this.
Sorry?
Of course, I can give you empirical evidence for this. The empirical evidence exists globally. There is no market in the world globally that isn't capitalistic. There's no economy in the world. Give me one. Give me one that isn't enforced. So I don't mean one that any naturally evolved economy across the world that is not capitalistic by nature. Give me one. And by capitalism, I don't mean profit necessarily. I mean freedom to be
So
able to create the goods and services that you want to create.
so
Give
so
me
so,
one.
so again, I don't think that you're saying what I am pointing out here, which
Yeah.
again, I can forgive you for that, because this is how the world works often. So if you go to a chemistry lab, right, and
Mhm.
a chemist is there mixing again, I'm no chemist, so excuse me if I murder that, but you'd get the point. So if they're mixing the
Yep.
chemicals and mix X amount of chloride and X amount of hydrogen, and they get something, HCl,
Yep.
and they know what's going to come out of that. They do all their experiments, they get the chemicals they want, they make something out of it, maybe a bar of soap or whatever. They don't have to invoke any physics at all. And in fact, when you talk about physics to them, even
Mhm.
though physics underlines everything they're doing, but because
Mhm.
they're interacting with nature at a level higher, you can say a higher level, is less fundamental than physics. They don't even have to bother about the physics behind it. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter, because it's, in some sense, is relevant only academically. And
Yeah.
and that's where the problem is. But when they now start trespassing on that physics and saying things that, because they're mixing these chemicals, which they're correct. Don't get me wrong. Again, they're correct. So
Mhm.
they'll tell you the perfect outcomes of what they're doing in the lab, but there's no,
Yep.
there's no, but there's no invocation of physics there. And if a physicist come in to explain that, they probably have a totally different explanation, and even challenge some of the assumptions of the chemists that, you
So
know,
challenge my assumption.
that,
Tell me
that, that
where am I off?
so the point I'm making is that you are saying things, for example, that humans, again, I can't remember precisely the words that you used, but correct me if I've
Humans are
misreported that,
naturally capitalistic by nature.
and not communist. Take
Yes,
this word.
we are not naturally communistic.
I don't think that there's any
We're
evidence for that.
communitarian.
No,
We're
I
not
don't.
communists.
No, I don't think that there's any evidence for that. So what I think the evidence is likely to point to is that humans can be socialized to have a range of tendencies that will include some capitalistic tendencies and some communistic tendencies. And I think it's quite likely that will be the case. But
Are
bear
you
with me.
mixing? Are you mixing communitarianism with communism? I think you're mixing these two things.
But bear
I'm
with
not
me.
talking about
We've got some comments.
comments.
Let
Yep,
me just quickly deal with those. We've got quite a few comments actually.
we
So
do.
let's
We'll
acknowledge
see.
our listeners. So Holocene 6 has said, when you say communism, do you mean Russian or Chinese example? Maybe you want to say something about that very quickly. We've got lots of other comments. So very quickly,
Yep, yep.
across. Can
I'll
you?
fire through. I mean, I think Holocene. Thank you for the comment. First of all, it depends on what you mean by Russian communism. From you mean Soviet? If so, probably more likely that than the Chinese version. The Chinese version has also evolved because again, Russia's evolved and China's evolved. I'm still talking about both. I'm still saying the idea of focusing on fairness and equality, and then the and full enforcement and control of over market forces, which applies in both cases. Originally, now the Chinese system now is a bit different, but I'm still talking about them in general as a philosophy. And yes, so exactly. So his next comment about wouldn't the balance between market and planned economies be termed Keynesianism? Perhaps, but it depends on how you're implementing that. Um, technically speaking, we're talking in sort of a social capitalist economy is kind of what you're referring to. Keynesian economics, I don't think really covers this in this context. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but it depends on what you mean. I'm not sure what you mean by balance. Are you talking about more of a slant on the market controlling what the economy is? Are you talking more about that planned socialist view? I think there's a comment that's coming in. I agree with from Zizek, but we can probably talk about that. That applies to your question there, Holocene.
Yeah, you can carry on with the comments. So this is Zach from Buenos Aires. Oh wow.
There we go. Hello, welcome.
Welcome. Good to have you. Said, I am a communist and understand communism would be democracy inside the workplace, no profit, abolition of profit, stock market
Just
dividend.
before you move to that, I agree. This is what I'm talking about.
Right.
This is exactly my system. So my system takes elements of communism and applies it to capitalism to create the meritocratic autocracy. Within this, we're saying democracy inside the workplace, where you decide as a workplace who your competent meritocratic leaders are, and then
So
that
basically, you're saying, so basically, if I get you correctly, you're saying
Mhm.
a different type of democracy where people only are almost allowed or licensed to get involved democratically in areas where they are particularly informed and have a say,
Exactly.
such
Yes.
that you don't
Exactly.
want a market woman, with no disregard to market women. So they might be, more sort of equipped to vote around market issues, around who leads the market, than around who leads the school.
Exactly.
Right.
A teacher shouldn't be bothered about who the finance secretary is, the same way that a fisherman shouldn't care about who the minister of chemistry, for example, would be. It's just not relevant. But they would care about what matters to them. They're
Yeah.
vertical.
So the Minister of
Whatever
Fisheries, for example, and then,
exactly. A fisherman should have direct influence and control over who becomes the minister of fisheries. That is the view. And we make sure that everybody has a voice in a controlled, systematic fashion, rather than just a generic, who am I voting for my MP? I've got
okay,
Labour, I've got Conservatives. Okay.
okay. So we are, we're kind of approaching. I think we're on 45 minutes now. So I don't want us to not have enough time for me to, because literally I'm going to detonate the bomb on you now, because
Yeah. Before you throw the
and
bomb,
it's about
should we just fire through the rest of the comments, because I think it's all the
right.
same.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. So no profits, abolition of profits, stock markets, dividends. I'm not sure I agree with that. Every good thing, health, water, any public good is made by socialist struggles, and all the companies sell is made by the working class. I agree. The essentials, yes, I agree with this. I agree with this to a large extent, and this is one of the areas in which communism excels. I think ensuring that the basics are provided for, they're functionally controlled by the government, is absolutely
One of
essential.
the areas communism excels. So, in effect, I think you are maybe agreeing with me to an extent that we need elements of, even if capitalism is what you favor, and I can see why you would, because what better way is there to incentivize hard work and pursuit and innovation? It seems to me that you've got to dangle some carrot, which is the prospect of personal gain. And I do agree that it seems to me that there's almost nothing else that
Yeah.
motivates people that much. I think that's almost not debatable. I
So you
don't think
agree with me
most
that
people.
we're capitalistic by nature, then?
No. Again,
You agree?
no. Let me land. I'll explain what I mean by that. So
Hmm.
I agree with you to an extent. There's a big caveat which you're not putting in, which is what I worry about
Hmm.
in my. So what I'm saying to you is that and you've alluded to that. So what would usually end up having in a capitalist system is that you'd have a small minority who would literally dominate areas of their own, where they become either experts or get lucky, right? Well,
Yep.
however you want to look at it. And and so those people themselves, they don't necessarily become representative of the temperament of the whole population. They're not.
Yep.
I mean, even within capitalistic systems like America, like you would
Yeah.
still have people who can't be bothered.
Yep.
Okay, so to then say humans are by nature capitalistic is evidently fundamentally false.
No, but
You have a range.
depends on what
You
no.
have a
So
range of you have a range of temperaments here already that
no,
you see.
no,
Right.
because it depends on what you mean by humans. So you can never apply a monolithic approach to anything. I would never say
Ex- ex-
100% of
ex-
humans. No, but
exactly the point
yeah,
I'm making.
but I still need to make so. For example, I'm going to use. I'll use a relatively simple example. You have when you go to the shop or you buy a T-shirt, you've got extra small, small, medium, large, extra large, extra extra large. There are people that don't fit into any of those five categories, and you need
Yeah.
to get custom fitting. That doesn't mean that I won't still make extra small, small, medium, large, extra large. I will still have
No,
to create
no,
things
no,
for the
no,
vast,
no. But you no,
for the
but
vast majority
no,
of
no,
people.
no, no. But even within that, you've already made a range of like 5 different levels. So then
Yes.
if someone comes to me and says humans are by nature medium size, I'm
Fit
just going
into
to
five, for example. Let's just assume that this is what the range.
like,
Let's assume the range of clothing that's generally being done is five. But there's obviously going to be some extraneous examples. Does that mean that humans don't fit
no,
into those five?
I understand your analogy there, but I don't think it's
Mhm.
a good analogy for this
It's the same.
particular.
It's the same thing. If the vast majority of
So
people, if the vast majority of people are capitalistic, then
mm,
the externalities, or
eh,
sorry, the I don't want to say error term, because that's just economic. An
I think
economic
it's
term is
debate.
wrong in
So
this
again, the point I'm making is
situation.
I think it's debatable that the vast majority are capitalistic.
But give me an example of
I think
give me
that
an
is an
example.
assumption of
You need
your
to give me
own.
no no no.
That is an
You need to give me
assumption of your own model.
you need to give me an example of any country in the world, and we've had, and I mean the world. We have all these different races with
Uh,
different levels of advancement and development, etc. Give me one country that evolved to not be capitalistic. We've all
okay,
evolved to be capitalistic.
it's
All
the
of us.
next.
We've all done
No,
it.
no, just hang on a minute. It's the next segment actually, which we're going to dive into now, which I didn't want us to run out of time for. And
Yep.
one of the biggest criticisms of um, Western behavior towards communism that I have heard, and I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. So, and I'll let you, make of it what you will,
Mhm.
is the question of whether or not communism failed itself or it was actually fought against to almost perpetuate what essentially some people believe to be a myth that it never works, right? And I think the that is a reasonable charge. I am not saying the evidence fully backs that up, but I think there's enough in there to say, yeah, it does seem that communism didn't. It wasn't allowed. We didn't. If you don't allow someone the freedom to test something, right? You can't
Mhm.
turn around and say it never works. Put it that way.
Communism failed because it failed. Again, we've had 2,000 years of history to be able to look at countries that have tried to do anything else. The only thing that has been successful has been capitalism, period. There's no evidence for any other system anywhere else in the world. And we've tried multiplicities of systems, approaches to economics, etc. The only one that seems to, first of all,
Have we
sorry,
tried?
sorry, one sec. The only one that, first of all, seems to evolve, that appears, is communism, and the only one that seems, sorry, is capitalism. The only one that appears is capitalism, and the only one that stays is capitalism. Communism has failed. Any other kind of economic
Okay,
arrangement
does
failed,
that have to do with, again, this is me playing the devil advocate.
of
Does that
course.
have to do with the established world order
No, but
being
this is
ruled
before. I'm
by
talking about
being
before world.
ruled by capitalism and
But world order is
enforcing
200 years.
capitalism on the world?
No, but 200 years is world order. That's the world order is, well, even if you go back into slave trade. So we're talking 400 years, 500
Yeah,
years
yeah.
max.
Yeah, the world,
Before that,
the world order at the time was capitalism. It was enforced again.
yeah, I mean, if you go before that, we start doing the, what was the thing, that's cowries and stuff. When we're dealing with all of those trade by barter, and then we start moving into dealing with some kind of currency. Capitalism already existed before the existence of paper, or fiat money, or let
Oh yeah,
alone just
no, I
media.
agree.
We've just always yeah.
No, no,
And this is
no,
my
no,
point. My
no.
point is all.
I agree. I actually think that again, just the way that I described it earlier. I think capitalism, communism. I don't view them as two distinct things. I view them as two ends of a spectrum, right? Rather
But they're
than
not. This is
no, no,
at
no,
my
no,
point.
no,
I think
no,
capitalism is more natural
no,
because
no,
we
no,
do this
no,
by nature, but communism isn't. It's
no.
not innate in human
So,
nature to be communistic. We're
so,
communitarian, but we're not communistic.
what is the
It's
difference between communitarian and
so
communist?
communitarian is where
Again,
you care
I
about.
can't even pronounce the words, but
No,
maybe
it's
you
it's
can.
fine. No, it's fine. Because communitarian is basically where you care about your community and you want to live within a community. You exist. You don't exist alone. You don't want to cut out and just go do your own thing. You want to exist in this bigger world with other humans, and you all have a community. Communism is focusing on the economic and political model, where it's mostly about command control of resources, of deployment of capability, and control of the market. That's the biggest summary of that one, to just put that together. So it's different. We don't
So
naturally want to say we're all equal and we all exist within
so I think the problem with your conceptualization is you're making assumptions and taking your assumptions to be facts. So
I'm not
because I think no,
not
because I
made any
think if you no, well, there are a lot of assumptions there. So because I think if you're saying that this is how humans are, I think it depends on. So humans become how their societies are structured, right? So
no
if you get no no
no
no
no
no
no no
again no
no
no no
no
no no again
no.
can you let me explain this?
Sorry, go on,
So
sorry.
so humans become how their societies are structured. So again, I can explain this very simply. So, what capitalism does in its most sort of the purities is to increase the system of incentives such that the more you create, basically, the more you get for it, right? Roughly speaking, okay. And so you can easily, kind of kill that urge by changing, or not even kill, just tweak that urge by tweaking the reward that you allocate to certain accomplishments. For example, if you're a Premier League footballer in this day and age, you get exposure to a lot of media, you get popular, you make a lot of money. And so that's very high stakes. And, you see
Yeah.
people who I've heard about youngsters who go through the academy, don't manage to make it into the big league. And some of them become really depressed in life. But again, if you tweak the incentives around that, and there are alternatives. Again, I'm just saying this in an idealistic world. I'm not saying realistically you can always do that. I'm just kind of explaining human nature to you there.
Yeah.
Then how people pursue these dreams and how they think about it and the value they attach to it necessarily becomes different. Again, you're not going to be able to deny that. So what I'm saying to you is that the idea of capitalism itself, that is just this thing that and that's how we are. No, it's in us to tweak what we call capitalism, and in that sense, tweak how we relate to systems of incentives and reward.
I get what you're saying, but
Yeah.
what I'm pointing out is if you throw two people into the jungle and you say, here you go, you're in the jungle now, from year, I don't know, you're 2 years old or whatever, and evolve your own system, they're going to come up with capitalism rather than communism. Communism is
Okay,
artificial.
that
People
doesn't mean
don't-
that doesn't mean anything to me, and I say that because in many cases, so if you throw completely unsocialized men and women into the jungle and leave them alone, you will get a lot of rapes, right? There's evidence for that. You will.
no, I don't think so. I
No, you
don't. I
will. I'm
don't.
not saying every man will be doing it. You will get much more than you would in a society where
Regulated
we've evolved
society
laws.
because it's
In a society,
regulated.
no,
So
in a
if you take
society
away the
where we've
regulation, the numbers will be the same as those people in the jungle because people will behave differently when there are controls and systems in place. That doesn't mean that takes away what humans are. So people are going to.
exactly. So nobody is going to look me in the eye today and then say, "Oh no, men do this by nature," and so
A
just let
proportion of
them.
men do it. Yeah, enough. So a proportion of men are always going to be. I'm going to use the word grape because I think YouTube doesn't like the actual word rape. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but a proportion of men are
Would
always
be
going to be
inappropriate. Let's say
violent.
inappropriate.
They're going to be. I can just say grape. Grape is fine. A proportion of men are always going to be grapists, and a proportion of men are always going to be violent. They're going to be murderers. They're going to be thieves. They're going to be, all sorts of things that they're going to be doing. And it's like, well, that doesn't change the fact that if we have regulations in place, we're only controlling those behaviors. It doesn't mean those behaviors are not still there. That's my
Yes, and that's exactly the
challenge.
point I'm making about capitalism.
Mm.
So, but it's not only controlling them, it actually wholly socializes people. So what you find is that laws change our attitudes. Again, there's plenty of evidence for this. So for example, when the death penalty laws were first passed in the UK, the vast majority of people in the UK supported death penalty. They were against not killing murderers and police officers, for example, right? So it's
Yep.
taken 50 years for the law to socialize the UK public into saying, look, we're not going to be killing people. So now the majority of people in England and Wales agree that a death sentence is not appropriate. For the first time, I mean, this happened
No,
just a
but
few years
you
ago,
need
for
to
the first
understand. You
time
need
in
to
50
also.
years. So, so,
But
so, so,
you
so
need
the
to
point
understand
I'm making is
motivation.
that the point I'm making is that those regulations not only tame people, it
No, but it
literally
also
changes
it's
them.
it's not taming. No, but and this one we can disagree. And after
Yeah.
this, I'll jump. I just need to finish because the comments are beginning to pile up low key. But 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 the thing you also need to think about is the fact that people change regulations based off of the regulations that came before them. So, for example, if the regulations around modesty say, okay, people now need to wear hijabs or wear hijabs, starting off with that. Sorry, well, scratch that. I'll use a different example. When you have a situation where you'd say, here are the laws that are restricting the behaviors you can do. In the past, people used to do lots of really terrible things. When we used to do hanging, drawing, and quartering, I'm sure you're aware about that really terrible way of executing people. They hang you first, and then they'll draw. I think they draw. Someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but they draw you over some wheel and stretch you and break your spine. Then they'll attach you to four horses, and then they'll slap the four horses so they just run off and split you into four pieces. The idea about that was to stop the most egregious behaviors from people within the citizenry, which worked because people stopped. They didn't want to be that. Even back in Vlad the Impaler, who was impaling people, a lot of the things that he was doing was about making sure people were not doing the things that they were supposed to, that they were doing at the time. Now, the punishments can reduce over time because the crimes have reduced over time. It doesn't mean that people are still not willing to go back to more extreme things if the crimes are
I
as
think
bad as they
so.
used to
So,
be.
so again, I think you're making a fundamental error here, and yeah, I think
We can come.
no,
We can come.
yeah, I
We
think
can
it's
come.
hard. I think it's hard once someone doesn't know the fundamental principles of what's being talked about. But there is literally something called operant conditioning, right? You can change a person inside out. So again, this is not an assumption I'm making. It's a it's used all the time. The advertisers use it. You can
Yeah.
change people. You can change them from black to white. Again, I'm not talking skin color. You can change them from not all the time. No,
Thinking,
just
etc.
like
Yes.
yeah, just like nothing works all the time. But
Yeah,
literally,
but
you
what's
can do
what's
that.
that?
So it's not just for oh, I don't want to be killed, even their understanding and their attitude. So, for example, in European societies, when women's rights started, it would be, oh, it's just not cool to not do this,
Yeah.
maybe being a certain way to women. But over time, attitudes have actually conformed. So what you're having is that the younger generations, not only are they saying, I'm not going to do this because I don't want to fall foul of the law. They actually agree with the underlying concept. Do you not
But
understand what I'm saying here?
the issue,
Like
I get what you mean. The
so
issue, the challenge.
fundamentally they've changed.
No, but the challenge I've got is
Yeah.
that it's when you take away the cameras, you see what people really are. That is my challenge. That very often, if you go put out surveys, you have people in front of professionals, have conversations, etc. They say all these things, and you would know this. You within your career, you
Yeah.
definitely run to multiple people who would say wonderful things in your face, and they go away and go do something completely different. Human
Oh, yeah.
nature, and the other part about that is that if you forget the indoctrination, because what you're talking about is indoctrination. The next set of
Well,
people that come out,
if you call that indoctrination, then you can as well
that's
call
what it is.
everything. Yeah, you can call everything indoctrination, including
But no, but what you said is
no, including
no, but
even
it's not.
including even every book you read, every news
Yeah,
you listen to
it's
indoctrination.
information indoctrination, etc. I agree. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
disagree.
So if you
I think
say
most of the information
all of that is indoctrination, then yes, I agree.
Yeah, we agree, but the difference is indoctrination on an individual basis is different from indoctrination on a large scale basis, which goes back to my issue about the capitalism communism debate. About, it's like, well, if we talk about capitalism and communism, sans indoctrination, communities, countries, societies still pick capitalism over communism every time. Communism only happens whenever it is chosen and imposed on a country. It doesn't happen naturally. I don't know any country where communism has happened naturally. It's always been imposed. It's always been forced. People have never come together
So
to say,
so
maybe we need some
so so
communism here.
so
We should do
almost
some bit
so
of communism.
almost I think that's a by the way point. It's not a very important point, and I say that because almost every big human achievement, in that sense, has been literally enforced, as you and I have pointed out just a moment ago, that you have to have strong leaders who come in and democratically, sometimes autocratically, sometimes say, this is not
Mm,
right, and impose. So even all of these ideas of people paying taxes
mm.
and council tax, people, if you don't enforce these things, look, half the country is not going to do it, right? They,
Yep.
they, they just they just won't. So that doesn't mean that those things are failures. Just because if you don't police them, they're not going to happen. That means because it's not natural, then don't ever do it. Because that's the point you're making. You're saying, because if you allow people, they're just going to default to this mode. Then that's what makes it the right mode. Of course not. A lot of things we do.
I'm
Speed,
not saying
speed,
it's right.
speed,
I'm
speed
not
limits
saying
on the road. Speed limits on the road. If you
I
don't
know.
enforce, if
I'm
you
not.
don't
I'm not.
enforce them, half the people will not obey them, right? If you don't
I
enforce
am
them,
not going
it
down
doesn't
moral
it
judgment
doesn't
grounds.
mean that because we have a tendency to speed, we should just allow everyone to speed. That's the best thing to do.
I am not going down the moral route of saying, well, this is moral or immoral. I'm just saying when you leave humans to their own devices, they do specific things, or there
Yeah,
are
but
a
that doesn't
specific way.
mean but that doesn't mean because they do that. I get what you're saying, but what I'm saying is it doesn't mean that because they do that, that's the best thing to do. That doesn't prove that. You still have to prove that it's the best thing to do, irrespective of whether or not is what humans will default to. Did you get the point I'm making? I'm not
Yeah,
saying
to
either
a
way.
degree.
Either way, it doesn't. I'm not saying that disproves what you're saying, but it doesn't prove
Yep.
what you're saying either. That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying that point. It's a
Oh, it's
it's
fine.
a it's a by the way point. You get the point though.
Yeah, I get you. Let's get to the comments because they've
Right.
actually piled this is the first time they piled up to this degree, right? Okay,
Yeah,
so
let's do the comments.
Zizek, communism is jobs to be democratic, not boss tyranny. I am not sure what that means, but I'm not sure what that means. And not just as a form, but about the actual money, abolition of profit. I don't agree with you on this one, Zizek. I'm not sure that we should abolish because my fundamental premise at the start of this pod, you might want to go back to the beginning to see what I was talking about when I talked about meritocratic autocracy and the distinctions between communism and capitalism, about how capitalism is necessary, even though it's not the best, it's got its flaws. Communism stifles a lot of important things. Innovation, if you abolish profit, what is someone's reason to create anything? The medicines that you use right now, the technology that exists, you being able to interact with us right now from Buenos Aires, is it? Yes. You've been able to do these interactions because of capitalism, because of profit. Somebody sat somewhere trying to make sure that this is the case. And I don't think we can abolish profit. I think profit is still necessary. We can control that profit to make sure it's in a structured approach. And but yeah. Yemi, do you have any thoughts on that comment, or do you want to throw anything else on that?
No. I was going to point out Oludatun Jones, who said both of
Oh,
you are aligned at the same
we've
time.
got a few. So maybe we'll start with the backlog and then come back to
Okay,
the newest
right.
ones. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, carry on then.
Young Santa from America. Well, thank you for joining all the way from America. Shout out to the other side of the pond. The majority of technological and medical advancements, at least in my country, the United States, have been achieved through publicly funded research.
There
Okay,
you go. There you
vaccines.
go.
We'll get to that in a minute. Vaccines, wireless technology, public sanitation,
Yes,
public
through
transportation.
through public funded, all of it.
We'll get to that in a minute. It is a broken system that allows a small minority to profit off the advancements made through taxpayer dollars. I'm afraid I disagree with you on this. During the COVID era, what companies invented the vaccines first? AstraZeneca, Johnson and Johnson, and what was the other one again? I forget what the other one was. Doesn't matter. They're all private. So we had private organizations that were able to create these things much faster than any
with
governmental funded.
huge government backing. They would
Doesn't
have
I
no
don't care.
chance.
I don't care.
They would have no
I
chance without
disagree. There's
government
no
backing.
evidence. You
No
need to
chance.
prove that. You have to
They would
prove
have
it.
no chance.
You can't just say it and there's no proof. I need proof because these are organizations that make billions of dollars in revenue annually globally. So I cannot agree with you about that one. It's a government funding. So it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, even some countries like Russia finally came up with its own. Was that government funded? Probably. Was it government directed, etc.? It was last. And then if we think about in terms of generally in terms of being able to create technological medical advancements across the world, it's always been the private sector that's been able to create this and make this happen. We can try to pretend that that's not the case. It is the case that private sectors,
So
even though
so
the
so
even though they're publicly
so
backed and
so
funded, it doesn't change
I
that
think
that doesn't work.
Oludotun Jones has said it all. I'm not actually against your idea that capitalism in some sense fosters this excessive drive towards being able to create something for profit. It's obvious that it does that. Okay, what I
Yep.
am saying is that my view is that you've got to balance that up with the what you might call aspects of communism, where so if you let any of those run riot, this is how I say it: if you let capitalism run riot, you're not going to
Yep.
get a good society, and if you let communism run riot, you're not going to get a good society. That's how I see it. So
I
it seems
agree.
to me
You
that
get
you've
worse
got
society with communism, though. You just get
Mm,
worse.
so it depends on what worse means. So what I think you might get with communism is that maybe there'll be less to go round. With capitalism, there might be more to go round, but the more might be concentrated in the hands of a few, the most. And then you get this problem. Again, I'm not an economist, so point it out to me, but I know that this thing called the Gini coefficient, which measures inequality, is one of the big
Yep.
predictors of crime, criminality, and a dysfunctional society. So
Of
if
course,
you
I
have a
agree.
society where everyone is poor, but
Yep.
fairly equal, it tends to
Yep.
be peaceful. And if you have a
Yeah,
society
but
where
it doesn't
everyone is
grow.
rich,
Oh,
and if you have a society where everyone is rich and fairly equal, it tends to be peaceful. But when you have a society where you've got a massive gap between haves and have-nots, then what you get is absolute mayhem, right? And so it depends on what you mean is better. Again, that's a
I'm not a fan
value
of neither.
judgment. Yeah, better is a value judgment. It'll depend on who you are. Some people would prefer to live in that society where, I've heard people say they'd rather be a lion in the jungle than a dog in a mansion. Right. Again, that's an individual choice.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think yeah, I agree. I don't like capitalism, which is the reason why I laid out my alternative to capitalism, at the front, because one of the limitations is exactly what you said. But moving on to communism failed, at least in Latin America and the USSR, because of 90 years of total ideological warfare. My government did at least 50 documented coups and redeemed changes in countries on the American continent alone. I agree with you. I mean, I understand. I've looked and researched quite a lot of this. Those not even they didn't even do psyops. They went even further and did actual black ops operations, within the communist areas. And it's like, well, again, for me, I go back to the basics and say, why throughout history have humans never defaulted to communism? That's my biggest issue. We've always been capitalistic across history. We're trying to create a new thing and shove it on people. And then when it doesn't work, we blame it on psyops or black ops or whatever it is that comes up to be able to affect what it is that we're doing. And I have a challenge with that. I just don't agree that that is the case. We don't have any evidence, historical evidence throughout time, immemorial, of humans being communists. We've been communitarian, but we're not communists. Why do we expect that somehow now is going to
I
change and that's
so
going to work?
so
Do you have any
so
thoughts
so
on
so so yeah so as I said already, I think I've answered that question quite a few
that?
times actually. I don't think communism will work. I don't see how it will work. Um, but I also agree to the extent that in our current paradigm, at least, it's the capitalists that run the show, and they've got a vested interest to quash any, sort of uh, uh, prospects of communism, by all means. And that's what we've seen. But even if they didn't do that, I agree with you to the extent that a pure, what you call pure communism is unlikely to work, right? So
Yep.
I think to an extent, you have to appeal to some of our base instincts. I'm not saying you have to go all the way, like you're probably almost suggesting, just this is who we are, just appeal. No, I think just as how we relate to each other and relate to our loved ones and children, if you have a friend, you appeal to some of their basic instincts. They want to be respected, they want to be loved, they want to be supported. You do all of that, but if you overdo any of those, right,
Yeah.
then there will be problem as well. So even good things become bad. So I can see that capitalism in a basic sense helps us to appease some of these base instincts that drive us. Okay, but you can't then just allow it to run. What you will create is dysfunctional societies where profit becomes everything, and shit, excuse my language, gets dumped into public rivers because someone feels that that's the best way to make profit. You see what I'm saying? Like because
Yeah.
profit just becomes everything then, and that's what you don't want to do. What's the solution to that? You moderate it with some communism. Again, I'm not saying what we need is communism. I'm saying the antidote, right, to capitalism running riot is a small dose, a sort of, I wouldn't even say a small dose, I'd say a controlled dose of communism, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, in societies where they happen to have some of the best human development outcomes. So you're talking about Scandinavian countries and some Northern European countries like Switzerland. This is what they do effectively, right? So you've got
Yep.
capitalist systems moderated by a huge dose of socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it, in a sort of seesaw, tweak all the time. And that seems to me to be how you almost constantly find your sweet spot. I don't think anyone would argue that a country like Sweden doesn't produce better satisfied humans than a country that like America on average. It seems obvious, doesn't it? Or Switzerland or Iceland but so that's my view. I, I'm not pushing back against the idea of capitalism. I'm rather helping you to apply the brakes. I don't know if you. So it's not. Oh no, you're wrong. That's not how I'm coming at this because I can see the point you're making. I'm just saying, without applying the brakes to this, what you get is chaos.
Yep.
Because
Agreed.
it'll work as long as you can control the speed.
Agreed. Well, to a degree,
Yeah.
but I don't want to label the point on this one. Communism brought Russia from a feudalist backwater to the number two world power for 60 years. I don't know if you're talking about USSR, that's 300 million people across the entirety of what the USSR was before. I don't think it's a fair assessment because it did end up breaking up in the early 90s. And again, it broke up because communism failed. Have you got anything on this one, Yemi?
Um. But again, I wouldn't say it broke up because communism fails. Every kingdom, empire rises and falls. America
Does it?
will. Oh yeah, America will not be what it is today in 300 years. I can tell you that.
But they
And I
have
can
got
tell you.
300 years and they're fine. Why did Russia fail? Was
So
it just a
so
couple
so
of years?
so I can
Lenin,
tell you that
Stalin, all the way through?
only from history. So Britain, at some point in history, Britain controlled a quarter of the globe. They just another Western European country now. In that sense, you might say they failed. Is it because of capitalism? No, a lot happens. Things change. Politics. All kinds of influences, competitors, and things happen. And so
But why
I'm
did
not.
Russia fail in 60 years though? It was 60 years and that's it, done. Bye. But the capitalists seem to have a lot more influence over a longer period of time without dissolving into nothingness. I wonder why.
Yeah, I wonder
Because
why.
communism. Next comment. So Unc is cooking. I got you, young Santa. I don't know. That's not me. I don't know who Unc is. Is that you? Are you Unc? It might be Unc.
No, I'm not.
I'm not sure what I mean. I'm learning the words these days. Vlad the Impaler impaled enemy Ottoman soldiers. Yes, he did. He was quite good at that as well. Capitalism is a necessary step in the evolution of human societal relations, but it will inevitably collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. The same is true of feudalism. Hence,
Absolutely. That's how I see
I
it as well.
agree. Hence, why I am 100% supporting, suggesting, and proposing a meritocratic autocracy. It's absolutely necessary where we have a system which is controlled through people who are the best at what they do, where everybody
You
has a vote that actually counts, and then we can make a difference and do
you
things that we
bet
need to do.
you better go trademark that term
I will. Meritocratic autocracy. Let's get
before someone steals it.
let them try. They haven't thought about it as much as I have. Both of you are allowed Oludotun Jones. Both of you are allowed and misaligned at the same time. It's hilarious. Yes, I agree. Behaviors are shaped by environment, culture, and historical development. I agree and disagree. This is the nature versus nurture argument. I am not 100% certain that it's 50-50. I think nature probably outperforms nurture, but you are
Again,
the
again,
doctor of
again,
the
again.
call.
That is
I
the
don't know.
economist. So again, that is the economist speak. Where
That's what I'm saying. That I'm
again, you
speaking to
just
the professional. This is
yeah,
your world. I don't know that stuff.
this models that you make where you just put something into it, which is fine. That's how models are made. You can't account for everything. It's fine, if you account for most things and it works,
Well, that
but
accounts for everything. Is there anything missing in nature versus nurture? You have nature, you have nurture. You have
no, no, but
your
you, but no, but you've said
biological.
you've kind of knocked nurture down a little bit and like, oh, nature runs the roost, like, or roofed, or well, how do they say that? Nature
I, I,
runs the.
I no. I think what I'd like to hear from you that could be useful is understanding what you think is the
No, no,
proportion
no,
in
no.
terms
I
of
think it
nature.
depends on what you're. I think it depends on what you're talking about, right? So I think it's hard uh, to make that determination in sort of broad sense. It depends on what
Globally.
you're talking about.
No, but let's take
There'll
averages.
be
So on average of all human behaviors, whether it's sexual selection, it is driver motivation for work and motivation, whether it's things about fashion choices, we know obviously that's going to be mostly quite nurture aligned, or it's like philosophical, ideological views, etc. What do you think? So if you could just split them and say, okay,
okay.
based on
So
your
so
own
so 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 I might be able to put a question to you to
Mhm.
again just kind of help us think about that. So why is it that most of us are able to easily recognize people from where they're from, even within the same country? So I meet someone from Scotland.
Mhm.
Uh, in many ways, I can tell a lot of difference between them and someone from Yorkshire or from
Mhm.
southwest of England. They're
Yep.
the same country, they just 300 miles apart. What that tells us straight away is that socialization does a lot. Like, okay, it's hard
Mhm.
again to put a finger on how much. Is it 50%? I don't know, but it does pretty much a lot, and you can see that straight away, right? You can
Yep.
tell, you can tell families that people are from. Sometimes you can tell someone who grew up in a middle class family, for example, from someone who grew up in a working class family in the same country. Like you can tell from how they speak, how they behave, how they eat, how they respond to life challenges. I mean, that tells you straight away that nurture does an awful lot without even delving into any sort
Is
of
it
detail.
though? Is
Oh
it?
yes, oh yes, oh yes,
Why?
oh yes.
Because if I hear someone's voice and the voice and their accent sound extremely foreign to me, naturally, I'm going to respond to that in a more exclusionary way. I would say, nope, this is different. I don't necessarily want to have anything to do with that person, or I need to consider them an externality. That's what I think. I think it's natural And that comes back to the nature argument, to assume that anything that is foreign to you is external and possibly hostile. Am I wrong?
I'm not sure why you said that. So I'm not. I don't know what do you mean by that. Why did you say that?
So I'm using an example of saying, okay, I've got a Scot in here. Scott shows up, and Scott's a good example, because I know someone who is half Scottish. Actually, that I was listening to, or having, if you call, anyway, it doesn't really matter. And then it's more about the fact that listening to the accent from someone from Glasgow, when they talk to you, automatically you're going to, especially if you're Yorkshirean or from us, where we come from slightly different, diverse backgrounds. When you hear Yorkshire, you're used to it. You hear someone from Scotland or from Edinburgh, you would say, "Oh, okay, this accent is different." Oh, sorry, something. Okay. You hear someone that is from Edinburgh, and then you would try to, you even though you understand how they speak, your natural inclination is to separate them from yourself and from people around you.
I see what you're saying. I'm actually not talking about just how they speak. I'm talking about, how they think, behaviors, perspectives on life. And you say that even people in the same country within different subcultures have different
Yep.
outlooks on life. So, someone who's born in a rich suburb of London who went to private schools, they see life completely differently than someone who was born in a council estate in Scunthorpe, right? So it's not just in their accents; it's actually even in how they see
The
life, what
behavior.
they expect, the behaviors, what they expect life to deliver to them, and forget
Yep.
about any opportunities that come before that, just the way they see life. So the point I'm making is that, without knowing precisely whether, where we put the figures at, is it 40%, is it 50%, it tells us straight away that nurture actually does a lot of heavy lifting. I can't, I, yeah, and I'm sure again, that, we've also grown up, in our own milieu, and we can see it. You can see a lot of people are 3, 4 relatives away from someone who's completely different outcomes because of their
Yep.
environment.
Yep.
So I think socialization does a lot of heavy lifting, a lot more than a lot of economists are willing to give credit for. So, which is fine because it's very messy and complex, and those details will not fit into your models because they're too messy and complex. They'll mess your models up. So the best way to deal with it is to ignore them because yeah. How are you going to fit all that into models? You just have to assume that everyone's the same.
Fair enough. We have a few more comments to just run through and finalize. But everyone, if you're watching this, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you're enjoying the conversations, just click on that button. There's two buttons, right? Early humans, Oludotun Jones. Early humans used to be communists, and then we evolved to becoming capitalists. I don't agree with that. Trade by barter was the precursor to being capitalist. It's just automatic. It's one of those things that just automatically creates how that would work out. And I just don't necessarily agree with this view. Um, Yemi, do you have any thoughts on this?
So I agree with the next comment of Oludotun Jones, just to strike that neither capitalism nor communism is
Mm,
natural in a biological sense. I think that's more likely to be correct. I think what happens is that one's a bit easier to do and people tend to do that. It doesn't mean that we're kind of necessarily wired that way. We can rewire people if we find a different way to make things work. So I think the question is really, do we have a different way? And I don't think we do. So if we don't, then fair enough. We've got to carry on doing what we do. But I'm sure if we can devise a new way of incentivizing people and, making it work, and we can codify it in law and, force the first generation to do it, in 3 generations, it'll become normal. That's how humans are. They'll just do it normally without, in fact, they'll say, "Oh, this is how we're born. We're born this way." you know, this is how humans are. We're quite
it's not
we're
happening.
quite malleable. Sorry.
I'm not seeing any evidence of this throughout biological history that
I,
we've not changed our behaviors. We just still remain the
I,
same. I'm not
I
seeing.
think it depends on whether or not the thing works. So, people, the behaviors do change actually, and it even changes at scale. Again, I've given you a few examples.
Mm.
Just take the cameras off the M62, just remove all of them and see what will happen.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. With controls, but you're proving my point that people are going to behave the way they do without controls. So
no,
people are still the
so
same. So
no,
it's
no, no,
you're not
no.
nurturing them into a different behavior. It's not
Yes,
that, for example, that we have kids and the next generation comes up and they will put cameras we put cameras on the M62 and we've trained them to know that on the cameras on the M62 mean it's 60 miles an hour and they don't drive 60, don't drive above that. And you raise them and you take the cameras off and they'll be like, well, now I know it's 60 miles an hour. I'm not going to drive any faster. They're still going to go 100 miles an hour because human behavior is mostly, in my view, I'm taking a standpoint on this, and I would like anyone in the comments, anyone watching, to challenge me on this. I am taking a stand. The vast majority of human behavior is driven by nature rather than nurture. It's the reason why a lot of men go out there and have sex with random women and have babies, and lots of women, and this is off topic. Why a lot of women sometimes go have children with men that they don't want to have long term, etc. It's a biological urge. It's nature to do things that we do that are going outside the way that we behave, or that we're expected to behave by society. It's just what it is.
so
That's why.
so 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 the problem with this really is a fundamental sort of, again, I think it's also the problem with even discussing capitalism, communism, because I see it as two ends of a spectrum rather than different ends. So when you say everything, human behavior is nature, again, that's just fundamentally false. It is so false that it's evidently so, because
Ow.
there is no nature without nurture. Like, tell me what human being grew up in all by themselves in the woods. So the day you're born, boom, nurture. No, 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 hang on a
Is it
minute.
nature to
Hang on a
eat?
minute. No, hang on a minute. Nurture. The day you're born, boom, the interaction between nature and nurture starts. So it's incredibly difficult to separate it completely in the way that you're doing. Like,
No, but I can't
no, we're
separate it
talking.
completely. I can do that. I can give you three examples. I'll give you three examples.
Yeah.
If you put someone in the jungle and you raise them in their house with their parents,
Uh-huh.
do these two individuals need to eat? They do, right? That's not
So
nurture. They don't nurture you to eat. Hold on.
So
Wait.
eating is not the
Yes or
form of
no?
behavior in that sense. You're
Don't
talking
complicate
about
it.
no,
Don't
no.
complicate it.
No, it's no,
Don't complicate it.
no,
Let
it's
me
you.
round it up first.
No. I know you can't. No, you can't get away with this. It's like saying, does a child need to breathe? Like, what are you saying? Like, what is
Nature
that? Is
is the
is
point.
that a behavior?
But let
Is
me get
breathing
there.
is breathing a
No,
behavior?
I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
So, does a child need to eat? I'm starting with a base instinct and I'm moving up. So,
Okay.
does that child, in both circumstances, doing there, two separate children, do they need to eat?
Is that a question?
It is, yes. Yeah, I'm
Why
literally a
why
question.
why do I need to answer that question?
Okay, so the answer is yes. Do they feel the urge eventually when they grow up above the age of 18 or 21, I don't know, whatever country anyone is, into the age of adulthood, do they feel the urge to have sex?
Okay, can I say something here?
Don't
Again,
wait,
I'm not complicating anything. I'm
don't
just
complicate it. Don't complicate it. I don't want to
but
complicate it. Keep
no,
it simple.
but you have
Because I'm
made
talking about nature
your
versus nurture.
point. You have made your point, haven't you?
Wait. Yes. Do they feel the need
There's
to
no
have
need to keep
sex?
repeating this. You've made your
Yeah,
point. You can say this
exactly.
100 times. There's no need.
And
Okay,
there's
let
three
me.
layers. I
Okay,
just did two. So there's
okay.
another one. I'm just going to leave it.
Okay. Let me now explain what you don't seem to have a clue about. Right. So there's a difference between biological urges that are tied to survival often and complex
Yeah,
behaviors. Totally different, right? Again, so again,
agree.
let me just give you some psychological basis to how these are studied. So
Yeah.
you must have heard about the Pavlov dog experiment, right? Where you,
Uh-huh.
so you're, sorry? I think a lot of people have.
Explain to the audience, just in case the
So,
audience.
so
But I have.
yeah, so what it is that you pair two stimuli together, right? So you, and then the conventional one was that you ring a bell and then you bring food to the dog, right? So after a while, the dog will recognize.
It was a rat first. It started with the rats. But it's
It's
fine. Yeah,
yeah. Let's
same thing.
just, for the sake of principle, let's just
Mm.
don't worry about
Yeah,
whether it was rat or beast. Just
yeah,
principle. So you
semantics.
ring a bell, you bring the
Mhm.
food, and normally when you get food, you start salivating. Like you can't control it. It's a reflex, right? So you start salivating. But what tends to happen after a while is that the dog understands that the bell means food. So even without the food, if you ring the bell, the dog starts salivating, right?
Yep.
So bear with me because I want to show you the different upgrade to that experiment. But there's a very important thing I want to point out here. So what will then happen is that when you ring the bell, the dog doesn't have to say the food; they start salivating.
Mm.
But you know what will happen if you keep ringing the bell all the time without bringing food? That reflex is called a conditioned reflex. It will be extinguished because the dog will then unlearn again that this
Mhm.
bell is no longer associated with the food. So what you've done the first time is fundamentally you've changed the psyche of the dog. But then if you don't keep reinforcing that change, it will change back. Okay, so that
Okay.
is for a stimulus where the dog doesn't have any control over. But there's another one where you call operant conditioning, which is the example of in this one you basically use reward and punishment, right?
Yeah.
And so you put a speed camera there, and if you speed, you pay a fine, right? And
Yeah.
what happens is that over time, fundamentally, people's behaviors will change. Right.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to have a speed camera there all the time. Again, in fact, it is more effective if you don't have it all the time predictably, for you to kind of do
Yeah.
it sometimes. But you
Which is
still
why
need
we
to
have
keep,
speed cameras that are off,
yeah, yeah,
and it's just
yeah,
they're just there, but you don't know, so it just regulates behavior.
yeah.
Yes.
So the point I'm making by showing you this experiment is that there's a difference between instincts and complex behavior, okay? And a lot of complex behavior is not like eating food. If you don't eat food, you will die. A child is born today and they start sucking. If you put your finger in their mouth, they're sucking. They don't even know that it's food, they're sucking it. That
Yep.
is different from deciding whether you want to buy a house or start a business, right? Nobody is born with an instinct to start a business. Forget that, right? It is socialized into them largely,
Mm.
right? Socialized into them. If they grow up in a society where nobody does business, right?
Mm.
And everybody just works for the government, and that's all they know, that's what they're going to do. That's what 99% of them will end up doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay.
I'm sure you'll dispute that.
No, I mean, no, it's fine. I mean, we can just move on just so we can cover because these comments are quite meaty. They're getting a lot more meaty as we progress.
Yeah,
Um,
we've probably got only a few minutes left now, anyway.
we do, yes. So then, how did little old communist Cuba create their own vaccine? This is going back to the conversation about the vaccines. If I remember, Cuba's vaccine wasn't regulated by the WHO. I don't know if you're a WHO hater or not. I don't know. I don't know the difference. I don't care. I'm indifferent because I've got my questions with global health controls, etc. But again, it's one of those things where if the government invests sufficient finances in the private sector, we can move on to that. I'm struggling with this name. Oludotu, because I'm used to Oladotun. So Oladotun. So my brain is like Oludotun. Anyway, when I was a baby, I was a communist. Am I still one now? Give me the money. Yeah. Lol, we haven't always been capitalists. Hunter gatherers weren't capitalists. Hunter gatherers were capitalists, generally speaking, because they would go, other people would come to them and say, can I have your berries? Can I have your mango fruits, etc.? Well, I don't want to give it to you. I have this, it's quite important to me. Let me give you 5 pieces of yam. No, I have my 3 mangoes. I prefer my 3 mangoes. No, can I give you 10 pieces of yam? Ooh, okay. Well, here are your 2 mangoes for the 10 pieces of yam that I was not willing to accept for 5 pieces of yam. That's
Why,
capitalism.
why,
It's always
why, 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 why is that not compatible with communism? In
because
communism, don't
they're
people buy
setting the
and
price.
don't people buy and sell in communism?
Yeah, but the price is set in communism. You can't change it based off of what it is that you determine what the price is.
So the
That's the
price of
difference.
everything is set by who?
Yes, in communism, it's set by the states because so you can't go to one person and say, okay, my tomatoes are worth £2 or £10.
So
Let me use £10.
where which country has done this? Where the government sets the price of everything?
They don't
Which
set it
which
directly.
country does that?
I mean, the USSR did a very fairly similar approach to being able to establish control about
Did they set the
price.
price for everything, or traders still had a leeway to say,
They
okay, 10 naira,
No,
5 naira?
unless I'm happy to have someone correct me there in the comments on this one. But traders did not have leeway to a bit. It's state controlled. Pricing is
So
state controlled. Supply is controlled. Production is state controlled.
the central government controls the price of toothpaste
Yes,
and say
yes,
this is how
yes.
much
Toothpaste
toothpaste
is
is
one
sold.
pound. That's it. Yep. I don't give it. I don't care what's going on here. It's £1. That's it. We're
Okay,
doing £1.
we will have to look that up.
Yeah, we can look it up if because that's the whole concept of communism. If that's not communism, if people are setting their own prices, then that's capitalism. We've crossed over into capitalism. The idea of communism is that
Which is why I've always maintained that to an extent this is a spectrum really with two ends of the spectrum.
yeah. So the socialism that's in the middle that allows you, but with communism, you cannot create your own prices and you cannot determine what it is based off the value. And to Jones's point here, hunter-gatherers were capitalists. They were able to determine what the value of the goods and services were that they're providing. If I decide that my berries are worth 15, potatoes, then you come in and say, here's 10. And I say, no, actually, I want 15. That is capitalism. So capitalism has always existed anyway, without us realizing what it was. The only problem, Young Santa, well, back to him, big fan of Young Santa. He gives some really interesting, introspective conversations here accidentally, but he does it well. Maybe it's actually just incidentally, or it's quite deliberate. The only problem I have is this: if we're going for appeals to human nature, that being the capitalistic social organizations, graping, etc., what mechanism would there be to overcome human nature in this system? What change in your estimation will make it that we suddenly become meritocratic animals? Ideally, this would be true democracy, but that hasn't really worked out for us. Liked and subscribed. Thank you for the like and subscribe. Going back to your thoughts and your concepts about what you're saying, what I'm saying is an amendment to the existing system around democracy. We tweak it so people vote for what it is that they're actually intellectually, socially, and professionally capable of doing. A nurse votes for the health secretary through her hospital that she's working in, and then she has a head of department who all the head of departments vote for the, I don't know how it works in nursing, but the vice chancellor of nursing, I don't know what super midwife, I don't know what it is. Whatever it is, someone please tell me in the chat. And then you put that at the top, and then those people across all the hospitals in your region select a chief nursing specialist, etc., based on that meritocratic approach, and then those people then vote in whoever it is that's going to be the minister of nursing. In this example, if we utilize this system, this overcomes human nature because it forces us to focus on our professionalism, our capabilities, our competence, and we focus on outcomes that actually matter to us. Talking about meritocratic autocracy, this person existed. They're fascinating. His name is Dina Sanicha. Is that the if you're interested in seeing what happens when a person devoid of nurture, is that the person? I remember. I kind of remember. Is that the person that was in the wilds or something like that? I don't know. I have to look into this. I'll keep this on the side just so I can research it to check. Well, if I remember, that was the Indian person. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll get back to you, Young Santa. Yep, cross is fundamentally wrong. Oh. Nature is the hardware, nurture is the software. You can't say we're more of one than the other.
Absolutely. Again, it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of you've got two things interacting. You can't decouple them. Like It's like saying a computer is more hardware or software. Like, what are you talking about? It's both, right? And you can appeal to the functioning of one or the other under specific circumstances, but you just can't decouple them. Can't exist without one or the other. Again, this is, I mean, if you any sort of basic understanding of human behavior starts on that premise.
I mean, I like to think I do have basic understanding of human behavior. I
Of
just
complex
disagree with some of these concepts. Yes,
complex human
complex.
behavior.
Yes,
It
yes,
starts on
complex human behavior.
it starts on that premise. I mean, even a child within weeks, they're beginning to they're beginning to relate to the mother in a different way to the father within weeks of being born. Like they're living in the same house, but they know. Do you see what I mean? They already
Isn't that nature? You're just proving my argument. If children
no.
start behaving differently to the mother versus the father, then that's the nature argument.
No,
That
that
the
is
nature of
also
the father
not
and the
true.
nature of
No,
the
no,
mother are
no,
different,
no,
and the nature of
no,
the child is different as well.
no. That is
You're
also
proving my point. You're
no,
proving
no,
my
no. That
point.
no. Cross. Calm yourself down. That is also not true. So what's happening is that this little thing, right, is born with a nature, but very quickly that nature has been molded by the environment around them.
Do
Okay.
children behave the same way in general to fathers and mothers? Yes,
Yes. They
exactly. Why?
no. So they behave. No. Hang on a minute. So they behave in the same ways generally to the same approaches in fathers and mothers. If you
Do they
change the
behave
way,
the same way in multiple cultures across the world? Do they behave the same way to fathers and mothers in general?
again, so when you ask a question, you cannot control how it is answered because
No,
sometimes even
I want
no,
to
no, no,
spread it.
no, no. You can
You're
only
going to focus.
ask you can only ask a question. You
You're
can't.
going to focus on a specific environment, and that's like, nope. Don't focus
No,
on
no, no,
just
no, no, no. I can answer your
spread this out
question because
globally.
sometimes,
Globally,
sometimes even the question can be problematic, and the answerer has to address that. Okay,
mm,
so children, again, not all children, even by nature, not all children are the same. People aren't born exactly the same. So there are variations, but you're
that's
right. In general, most people will behave in a sort of certain way given certain conditions. The problem, though, is which is what I'm pointing out to you, is that there's no environment that replicates the same conditions, not even in the same home. So the firstborn, the environment that the firstborn had in the same home with the same parents will be different from the secondborn. It won't be exactly the same. It'll be similar, but it won't be the same.
exactly the similarity is what I'm going at. In that,
Okay,
in most cases, humans are more similar than we are different, and I think we need to stop, in my view, pretending
mm,
that humans are so dissimilar that there are no contexts in which we generally behave the same.
no,
Yes, they're going to be
no.
exceptions.
I think you're right and wrong. It depends on what you're saying. So again, you're right. So I and Kevin De Bruyne are similar in that we can play football and kick the ball into the net. But if you're talking
Yep.
about are we similar in the outcomes that we can generate on the Premier League pitch? Of course not. But you're right. Again,
It's
you're
the
right and
same. It's
wrong.
just at a higher level, right?
Yes, but that higher level can produce staggering differences in outcomes, right? He earns
Mm.
he earns £400,000 a week, and
Yeah, because it's better at doing the exact same thing. You know
yeah.
what's true? The guy's just better at doing the same thing than
And
Mr.
and he's and
Mr.
he's got
Chief.
10 million followers on Twitter, So
Yeah, because he's better at doing the exact same thing that we're already
yeah,
doing. So I
so
like to kick ball. I like to kick ball too. But this guy kicks the ball to the point that he has
yeah.
10 million followers
So
and
are we the
100,000
same
pounds a
or
week.
are we different? Yes and no.
We're the same because we're doing the same things. We have the same interests. The reason why he has 11 million followers because 11 million people who believe in what he does and like that thing is making the money off it because there's multiple millions in multiplicities across the world who want to watch that thing that we all like, which is kicking a ball, which I think football is one of the dumbest things in the world. There's a man kicking a ball. He just goes, poop, kick the ball. And he kicks it, but he kicks it a little bit differently than others. There you
Why
go,
do why do
multi-millionaire,
why
celebrity.
do why do you think in every culture there seems
Mhm.
to be that concept of hero worship? You might be proving your point that we're wired that way.
You are proving my point. They all wire the exact same thing because we all look for capitalism. Is my point. We look for someone who
No,
is
no, no.
better.
So this is a different thing we're talking about here, not
No,
capitalism.
we're not. We're saying the same
There's
thing.
hero worship is
It's still
not
capitalism.
necessarily capitalism.
It's
Your
still
hero
capitalism.
can be
No,
the
strip back
village chief.
capitalism. Strip back capitalism to the psychological argument. What is capitalism psychologically? It is people looking at others and wanting to be better than them. That is all that capitalism is. And that's what I was saying in the beginning of this conversation about how humans are competitive by nature. We want to compete, not in the way that animals do, where we're eating other animals and we're eating ourselves and killing them. No, we don't necessarily want to kill anybody. What we focus on is on being better.
Well,
We want to be the best.
we used to fight wars as well and kill each other.
Yes, to be the best. In some cases, we will do that to protect ourselves or to expand power reach, etc. But generally, when we're competing as humans, we don't compete to exterminate others. We compete to be better than others. And it's the same thing. How do you prove that you're better? Capitalism. You can't be better than anybody else in communism. You're all the same. Final chats, and then we can probably move on to last thoughts. Is just call me Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, I wasn't sure if it was you or not because I was like, wait, hang on. But yeah, see, Olanrewaju, they struggle with Olu. God damn it, man. Olu Dotun.
You still struggle given that.
I'm still struggling. Nothing happened. I'm going to research this for the next episode. I'll be ready for you. Hunter-gatherers, last comment. Hunter-gatherers were so communistic in practice, shared resources, no private property, egalitarian. Capitalist core, capitalist need. I disagree 100%. I do not think that's absolute crap. It used to work when this what you're talking about is the community of the man with his multiple.
I also agree that trying to prove that hunter-gatherers were capitalists is a bit of a stretch. It is.
It's not a stretch. If you look into the research, and because I have done a bit of research about this one, is that it predates modern capitalism. Didn't come from nowhere. It came from that. That's what predated capitalism today.
Yeah, you would expect you would expect capitalists to retrofit our history in that way.
But I'm not even a capitalist. To be fair,
but you're not the one who wrote those papers.
No, but it's well, I mean, but there's no. How do you interpret the fact that people would say, "I have two berries"? I used the example earlier on. I have two berries,
So I think the difference between how you and I see this is, and we can use this as our last thought, is as my sort of viewing this as a spectrum of behavior, right? So I don't view capitalism as one thing and communism as another thing. I view them as a spectrum of behavior, just like extroversion and introversion. Do you see what I mean? So you might find some people are very extroverted and you can say, oh, this person is just an extrovert. And some people are very introverted, but most people are kind of a mishmash somewhere in the middle. Do you see what I mean? And that's how I view this capitalist communist thing. I think even if we look at how people behave with regards to tendencies, I think what you'll find is most people will kind of accept a sort of mix of, let's incentivize people, but let's also look after the weak. And I think most people would naturally accept that, even if it has to take a bit of conversation for them to accept that. I think, but most people will. That's my suspicion. I think there'll be a few extreme capitalism, nothing but capitalism, and a few extreme communism, nothing but communism. but I suspect that most people would accept a variable mix. So not exactly the same mix, a variable mix. So there'll be people who are more capitalist than communist. There'll be people who are more communist than capitalist, but they'll accept a mix. That's how I look at it. And so when you're beginning to think about how hunter-gatherers behave, I think what you will find is that within their behaviors, that you'd find a mix of those traits. I don't think you would find that they're just capitalists or just communists. I don't think so.
I agree. Should we go into last thoughts? Just the final comment that's coming from
absolutely
from Mr. Jones. Capitalism largely began and became prominent during the Industrial Revolution. Is very recent in our history as humans. Again, I disagree because if we go back to the hunter-gatherer approach, where people would be trading things, trade by barter, has always been a thing where we've been doing this and determining value before we trade anything. So if you go back to the basic human nature, we've always determined what value is, and we've always said, nah, no, I don't want your 2 pieces of yam. And they said, what if I give you 20? Okay, well,
I
actually,
just I
very
just wish all these economists would be able to will say one sentence without talking about human nature all the time.
no, but
It
it's human
it just
economics is literally it's a social science and it's craft. In my view, I think it's just is a dog shit,
no, science,
science, not real science. But it
no.
explains how to behave.
It is a social science. I'm not
Yeah.
disputing the validity of it, but I'm saying, it often works on models that are based on assumptions, and the economists tend to get
Not
lost.
always.
Often, often. I said often. I
Yeah.
didn't know.
Okay.
I said often.
Yeah. Because
So,
a lot of it
you're
is actually
trying.
based off of scientific analysis. We have scientific models that are baked into our economic theories. So, and I don't know if I call
Yeah,
them
yeah,
theories,
yeah.
but
So there's a lot
economic
of
theories.
math, but what I'm saying is that for you to get the model off, you've got to make assumptions. Again, this is how models
No,
work.
but that's science. I mean, everything is based off of assumptions, right? You can't create a model.
No, not everything's based off of assumptions. So it depends on what you're doing. Some science is more factual from the base. Okay,
Yeah, but
so
you have
it
assumptions.
doesn't. Sorry.
Give me an example. Give me an example of any science that is not. I mean, again, because my background is all this is STEM.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I would
yeah.
like to hear anything, even when we start thinking about physics. So we're thinking about, say, cosmology is a good example. Almost
Again,
everything there is based off of assumptions. It's very similar to
again,
economics.
I think you're not getting what I'm saying again. So you cannot compare. So when you're talking about economics, for example, and physics, right? So I'm not saying physics doesn't use models. It does, right? And everyone uses models. What I'm saying is that at its base, economics is models and assumptions, even at its very base. At the base of physics, it isn't, because what we use models for is the things that we don't have the information for. As the information expands and we get more and more and more, a lot of these models begin to collapse
Give
into.
me, give me an example. I can't think about any physics-based models that isn't based off of assumptions. If you even think about if you think about general relativity, Einstein's levels of that, one of the assumptions that he put into that is the cosmological constant. It's an assumption. There is no fact behind it. It's changed lately to become something slightly different, but it's like, well, it's still assumptions. There's no
Yeah,
fact behind it. They've
yeah,
turned
yeah.
that now into dark energy, for example. But it's like, well, it's still based off of the fact that these are all assumptions. Hawkins, a lot of the things that Hawkins has done, when we're thinking about in terms of the work he's done, very similar as well to general relativity, is also based Hawking radiation is based off of assumptions.
Okay,
I can't think of any prominent physicist
okay,
or any prominent
okay.
scientist that does not build their models based on assumptions.
Okay. I can tell you that as we sit here now, right, we understand how the Earth moves around the sun to
Yeah.
staggering accuracy. Again, you can go and Google this, right, with staggering accuracy, and we know it. We know where the sun's going to be, when, how it's moving. We understand that.
It's based on assumptions as well.
No. We understand it precisely.
No, we don't. It's based. No, we
Okay.
don't. We don't. It's
Okay.
based.
Okay.
It's again
Okay.
based on assumptions, because the assumptions, and this is why I said cosmology is a good example. Part of that is also the cosmological constant, and it's a lot of everything in science always has an error term. Mr. Jones is going to agree with me on this one.
So an error
He
term
knows
is
this.
an error term is different from an assumption. Again, this is
An error term is an
no,
assumption.
no. It's not an assumption. It's not an assumption. It's not an assumption. So, for example, if you go into a lab and you do a blood test, we might say that this blood test is, again, I'm just pulling this number out of just for the sake of argument. We might say you get a false positive 1 in 1,000 in 1,000. Right?
Yeah.
So what that tells you is that 999 times you get a positive, it is positive. That is not an assumption. That's a pretty accurate test, right? It doesn't have to be. If you get something right 999 times out of 1,000, that
Yeah,
is accurate. That is very accurate.
What are we talking about here? That's 99.999%.
A lot, even in
Like what? Like what?
even in medicine, there will be tests. I'll be able to find one for you after this. So I'll give it to you. There'll be tests where if you get a positive,
Oh yeah, I
some
know those.
tests,
Yes, I
you
agree. I
it's a
agree. There's
90,
some
yeah,
tests.
it's a 999 over 999 over 1,000 that it is correct.
Pregnancy
You
with
know, there
almost
will, yeah. So
relationship and everything.
and that's accurate. You know, you can't say that that is an assumption. Like this is as good as it gets. It's no assumption here. It's accurate. So the one out
It's
of
close to accurate, but it's not 100% accurate. There's still some assumptions baked
yeah,
in.
I think I
Like
think I think most people will take 99.9% to be accurate. Most people will. That is
still
as
some
accurate.
assumptions. Fair enough. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So what are we getting to with this with this
So what we're getting to with it is that there are different types of signs that we make and different levels of accuracy. Okay, and what I'm saying is that when you it's like the weather science as well. Often we can't model it properly. There are lots of
because
things.
it's not accurate.
Yeah,
With
so
lots of
they'll
assumptions.
say 30% of rain tomorrow, or 40%. It's hard to
Assumption.
give you, yeah. So it's not to knock the science, it's the way it is. And even in medicine, for example, some medical fields are more accurate than others, right? So it's not all the
Agreed.
same, so the differences, and that's just how the world works. So what I am saying is that the social sciences, it's not just economics, and even psychology is half science, half social science. It's like one leg here, one leg there, and it also suffers from the same problem where you often have to make assumptions, right?
Yeah.
And those assumptions just don't have the same power as things that you can measure,
Yeah. Agreed.
which physics, chemistry, biology, they've got things you can measure. The distance as the crow flies between London and Manchester, they can tell
It's
you to a very remarkably accurate degree.
they still fail. And my point is just when it comes to economic theory, it's not as bad, it's not as good, etc. But should we go to closing thoughts then?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
this
yeah.
has been
Closing thoughts.
I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. It's been a very enlightening episode, but it is 2 hours, and I'm sure some of our viewers will want to crack on to get some other stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I
Give me
think
the
we've,
closing
I
thoughts.
think, I think we've done justice to this. So I think you can have the last word. I think I've kind of summarized earlier on my view. The spectrum. I've summarized it. So just have a go. Summarize your views and
My
let's
view,
go.
summarizing this, I don't like capitalism. I don't like communism. I think they're both dog shit. I think that my approach is a meritocratic autocracy. If you're with me, please like and subscribe and support me going into the point where I can go out to start saying this in public.
You need to first copyright that term.
I need to probably do that. I'm going to do
Yeah,
it.
we want to be sure that you own that term before someone says it.
Exactly. I'll arrange it. I'm going to define it. So my view is that meritocratic autocracy is a system of governance where power is concentrated in the hands of a single individual, single leader, or elite group, where that power is allocated based on merit, focused on things like ability, performance, education, contribution, rather than birthright, wealth, or popular vote alone. Breaking it down, meritocratic, we need people who are focused on getting leadership and authority through demonstrated competence, not inherited or bought or lobbied or bullshit through votes. The officials are selected based on skills, exams, achievements, and a proven track record. Autocracy, where there's a single leader or central authority at the very top, a group or an individual that can be broken down as we listen to more conversations, where they have final say over laws, governance, and policy. There is no true democracy in the way we talk about this, and I need to emphasize this so people understand that in this point, the votes and the democracy exists through your focus on your specialty, your specialization, your specialty, the areas of your understanding. So education people, teachers focus on education, scientists within the medical field focus on medicine, people within farming, the farmers, their votes count toward farming. And then finally, power is centralized. And it's not necessarily, it's not hereditary. and it's not lifelong. It's based off of the votes of the people through these hierarchies that we've been able to establish. And that's my own view. Capitalism, communism, they both suck. But we just need to come up with something quite different.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining us. I've enjoyed today's conversation, and thanks all everyone who's contributed some really great comments that helped us to kind of flesh out our thoughts a bit better. Join us again for the next episode, and have a good week ahead.
Misaligned signing out.